Hi, this is Ronnie Platt from the band Kansas, and you are about to blast off to the music universe. Rock on.
Hey, how are you, buddy?
I'm well. How about you, Matt?
I'm really cool. We just hung up with Ronnie Platt, lead singer of the band Kansas. And I didn't know when I reached out, because I love Kansas's music. I had no clue when I reached out how inspirational this interview was going to be. This man went from working a day job to the lead singer of one of the most important and influential progressive rock bands of our era. Really, really cool story.
Yeah, it's a lot like, I don't know if you've seen that Mark Wahlberg movie Rockstar, but it's a lot like that. You know, he was seen playing in a cover band. And
we don't want to give it away because Ronnie tells it so perfectly. But yes,
I'm not going to give it away, but it's sort of the storyline. If you've seen the movie, it's a great movie, and his story is really, like you said, inspirational. It's great, and it really just warms your heart knowing that you can do this yourself in America.
And you can have whatever success means to you if you feel you haven't reached it yet, and whatever you're doing. Gosh, I feel like Tony Robbins now, but I'm even wearing the black, like fitted. But it really goes to show that you can have success. If you feel you haven't achieved success, you can achieve it at any age. He is, I hope you won't mind me saying, because it's on Wikipedia, but he is 62 now. Doesn't look it, doesn't act it. He is 62. So that means 8 years ago, he joined Kansas when he was about 54, 55, between 53 and 55, depending on the dates. 50 some years old, quits a day job, finishes up, wraps up with a cover band, and here he is. And it's a really cool story for how it happened. And we plop you in the middle of a conversation that we are having about in-ears, playing live, and drumming, because drumming always comes up with someone.
Can't help it.
It was just a fun conversation. So here's Ronnie.
Back in the day when, there was just floor monitors, you didn't, I don't think the people that use in-ears today and have always used in-ears don't realize that, boy, if you were even 10 degrees off the line of throw of that floor monitor, you lost 50% of your gain. So you've had the drummer and the guitar player just, bleeding your eardrums to death. And with in-ears, it's so great because no matter where you go on stage, it doesn't change. And I'm always shocked at the end of the night. The last note of Wayward Son, I always pull my ears out, and I'm always shocked at how loud the audience is.
Yeah.
We have a couple of ambient mics, but I like to hear the band exclusively. And, our vocal mics are picking up a little bit of the audience anyway. But I like, no ambient mic in my ears whatsoever. So it's always a shock to me at the end of the show to take out my in-ears and just hear how loud the audience is. And it's probably saved a good percentage of my hearing over the past 20 years.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you one of those guys who one ear in, one ear out, so you could hear the crowd? I know I've seen so many shows.
That throws me. I don't know how people do that with one ear. And, I guess it's all a matter of what you're acclimated to. But, man, I love that isolation. I love to, hear the band as clearly as possible. And it's so nice, theoretically using in-ears, it's supposed to not change depending on the venue, no matter what venue your in-ears are set up, but it doesn't work that way because sometimes you're on a wood floor and that resonance is coming through, mics on stage. And, the times when they're setting the PA down on a wood stage on each side of the stage, you've got all that vibration, that low frequency coming back into everything that's live on stage. So it's, you have to tweak everything depending on the venue. But they're a godsend to me.
Yeah.
I always tell people I have drummer's ear because I hear better out of one's ear than the other because I would just blast so loud growing up playing.
Try standing next to Phil Lehart for a few years.
Sonny, what are you saying, Sonny?
Well, I'll take your word on it.
Yeah.
Right. For Pete's sake, the guy's 72 years old. He's beating the drums like he's 18, for Christ's sake.
Oh my
I
gosh.
just I have a set of Roland before we get started, the new V drums, and I was playing last night.
Oh, nice.
And
I'm jealous.
It's the new 706 series, and I was playing them last night. And I always use for those I use the grip sticks, the Zildjian grip sticks or whatever, and then the tips, plastic tips, so they don't leave marks on the cymbals. Well, I guess I was doing something right because the tip broke off. So I flip it over and finish the song. Well, then the snare stops working and it came unplugged. But before I realized it was unplugged, I'm freaking out. I'm like, this kit's too expensive for this to happen.
Live by the sword, die by the sword, right?
Yeah. So,
and since we've just dropped everybody into the middle of our in-ear conversation, I will say, welcome, Ronnie, to the Music Universe podcast. It is such a pleasure to have you. I'm such a fan of Kansas. I know you are about to go into your about 8th or 9th year. I know you joined in 2014, and you were a fan of Kansas beforehand. Talk about how, I mean, that's the dream come true for people, I think, to join a band they've loved. Talk about that before we get going on what you've been doing recently.
It is really something, and I know I belong to a very exclusive club, and I've said this many times. You've got Arnell and Journey, and you've got Kelly Hansen and Foreigner and Tommy DiCarlo fronting Boston, and probably a half dozen other guys I can mention. But I wonder if they were really as big a fan of their particular band that I was of Kansas. I mean, I knew Kansas material long before I was in the band, and as YouTube will attest, and it's amazing things that come out of the woodwork when you become the lead singer of Kansas. I mean, my cover bands back in the 80s were doing Kansas songs because I insisted on it, and I happened to be lucky enough to have a lot of bandmates that were progressive music lovers. And, my early bands always did a lot of Yes, a lot of Kansas, a lot of Rush, and not just Wayward Son and Point. I was talking to my guitar player from a cover band I was in the 80s, from 82 to 87, and we were doing Right Away. How many people know Right Away?
Right.
That's a Kansas song, believe it or not. Really some deep cut stuff from Kansas. And that's just, it's been my lifelong love of the band. I remember getting Left Overture when it came out, and, fallen in love with the band. And I've always been a prog rocker, and Kansas has been a big part of that.
how did you discover Kansas? I mean, were you really young and just heard them on the radio? Like, what drew you to them?
Well, when I was a kid and Wayward Son came out, you just couldn't get away from it on the radio. And the same thing with Dust in the Wind. But Wayward Son, from Left Overture the year before, was such a powerful tune. And I was always drawn to singing, and the a cappella opening of that song is just so big. It's so huge. It grabbed my attention, and went out and got the album. And back in my day, when I was a teenager, you went to the record store and you bought the album. And of course, the artwork on the albums back then were also a big part of it. And Kansas always had like really
Beautiful
cool
stuff.
artwork,
Yeah.
cool artwork. So it was mesmerizing to bring home a Kansas album and, put it on the turntable and just be staring at the album cover for hours while you're listening to this music. It really gave you a sense of, what the band was like, the whole story type of, I'm at a loss for words here. Just how, just the whole persona of the band. And I just remember getting Left Overture and playing it to death.
Mhm.
And it really was, it really was the beginning of my love of progressive music.
That's
Then
awesome.
of course, the musicianship, and once you start digging into the music and you you start to discover things like music theory and just how much Kansas interjected that into the writing, the amazing talent of Kerry Livgren and Steve Walsh, of course, writing the motherlode of the songs. It was very inspiring.
That's amazing. You're living a lot of people's dreams. Like I said, that's just so cool. So when you were auditioning for Kansas, and we really are interested in your story, because it's not often we get to talk to somebody who's come in so recently. When you were auditioning to a band like Kansas, I mean, when you were auditioning for Kansas, or the process, I should say, what were they looking for, and how did that come to be?
Well, you know what? Technically, I never really auditioned.
Really? Wow.
But from 2007 to 2011, I was in a band called Shooting Star. Ironically, also from Kansas, the state of Kansas.
Right.
Ironically, also started as kind of a prog rock band. Ironically, also with a violin player. If you're familiar with Shooting Star whatsoever, I mean, great band. They should have been a lot bigger than they were, but I was singing for them, and we did a show up in Walker, Minnesota called the Moon Dance Festival.
Mm-hmm.
And guys, this is the lineup that was on Thursday. I never get tired of saying this because it's so unbelievable. The lineup was Shooting Star, Foghat, Kansas, Sheryl Crow.
Wow.
And then a little band called Journey.
Wow.
That was Thursday's lineup. Is that just insane?
That's crazy.
A monstrous lineup.
Right. I mean, that is like an ultimate lineup there, but it was so cool that, here Shooting Stars up, we're doing our set, and, I look over and I see Rich Williams at our monitor board, watching the band. And I'm like, gee, no pressure there. How cool is that? Rich Williams is watching our set, really cool. And that, I think that was like 2009 or 2010, long before, Steve's announcement of retirement. But I think Rich and Phil might have put me in their back pocket back then, anticipating maybe Steve retiring back then. Who knows the story there, but it's really, I think, the time when they took notice. And of course, through the channels of just knowing the band, Phil's drum tech, Eric Holmquist, his father, I was in a band with back in the 80s. We did all Yes, believe it or not, a couple of Kansas tunes here and there. Eric's been Phil's drum tech for a long time. And so there was a connection there. And when I got the text message from my friend Dina, who happens to be Dennis DeYoung's niece, Dennis DeYoung, formerly of Styx. She texted me this message and she said, "Did you see this?" And it was the advertisement announcing Steve's retirement. And usually when you see that in print, when they make that public, they were in the middle of a tour. And I'm like, well, they got to have a new singer, they're touring. Are they,
Right.
going to announce a new singer soon? And just guys, on a whim, I messaged Rich Williams on Facebook and I said, "Rich, it's Ronnie Platt from Shooting Star. Give me some consideration." That was a Wednesday. And Thursday, I came home from work, was about to leave the house, and I'm like, I'm going to check my messages. And I get a message from Rich, and it's like, "Ronnie, if you get this message within the next hour and a half, we're about to go on stage in Houston. Give me a buzz." So I called Rich, talked to Rich for a little bit on Thursday. He said, Phil would give me a call on Friday, which he did. And he asked me to come down to Atlanta. I'm in Chicago, and he asked me to fly down to Atlanta on Monday to meet with him and Rich. And they were very explicit, saying, "We're not having you come to audition. We've seen you with Shooting Star. We've seen you on your YouTube stuff. We know you sing your ass off. We just want you to come down and meet with us and, see if you'll fit in with the band, if you're a good guy, blah, blah, blah." I'm sure they were seeing if I had any LSD. That's lead singer disease, guys. Lead
Right.
singer disease. Okay. No drug reference there, but and it was so
That
funny.
might have earned you brownie points too.
Right. You know what? I always joke with my friends that I'm the cleanest rock star they ever met in their life. I've never done a drug. I never drank, and never had any bad habits other than buying guitar and bass guitar and keyboard and music gear addiction.
That's all great though.
Right. But it was really something, to talk with Phil and Rich, and we probably talked for 3 hours, and I would say maybe the first 5 minutes was business. And the rest of the time was just telling stories and laughing. And it was so neat when I'm immediately flying back to Chicago. I flew in, 3-hour meeting and flying back to Chicago. And it was so funny walking out, Rich is probably walking, 15, 20 feet in front of me and Phil. And, Phil looks up at me and he goes, "Well, that went well." And he's like, he's kind of like saying to me, "You got the job, but I got to talk to Rich," and,
Right.
but I mean, even at that point, nothing's done until it's done. Right. So,
Right.
I mean, even at that point, I was still skeptical of wondering if I got the job. But the very next day, I'm back in my 18-wheeler in Chicago, driving around the beautiful streets of Chicago. And I went to one of my customers and checked my email, and there I got an email from Phil, says, "Congrats, you got the job. The band is pumped. Let's get to work." And it really was, it was pressure time for me. All of a sudden I'm the lead singer of Kansas. My local cover band, Ara, had a slammed summer schedule. I mean, there were probably weeks that we were doing 5 shows a week, because all the summer festivals, it's Chicago. There's a lot of people in Chicago. There's a lot of suburban areas that have, week-long festivals, and, you grab while the grabbing is good. So, we try to work as much as possible. And, here I am, with all this local work and working my day job, and then, getting the job in Kansas, and really just had to make major adjustment and guys, that was 8 years ago.
Wow. Do you, when you get that call, do you instantly just have to quit everything and go tend to Kansas, or was it kind of a transition?
Yeah, that's funny because I remember when I got the job in Shooting Star, I, you know, I met with the manager after the day after my very first gig with Shooting Star, and I'm like, God, am I finally going to be able to quit my day gig and do music 24/7? My lifelong dream to do that. But that day gig allows you to do things like eat food, you know have a dwelling to live in,
Fly down to meet Kansas.
right, fly down to meet Kansas, stuff like that. So I really wasn't ready to pull the trigger on everything, because when I was in Shooting Star, I was still able to keep my day gig because Shooting Star really didn't do a lot of gigs over the course of the year or years that I was in. So and I will say this, the company that I worked for, they were huge fans of mine. They always came to my gigs, and they were just super nice people and supported me in my music career, which was really super nice of them. So I was able to use vacation time. And what made it really convenient is Shooting Star was based out of Lawrence, Kansas. So, a flight from Chicago to Kansas City on Midway Airlines at the time, was like an hour flight, was really super cheap, of which I never paid for. Vanoys just put that on, used points for my flights and stuff. So it made commuting to Kansas really simple. And again, it wasn't like we were playing every weekend. So I was able to get that day gig, but then going into Kansas, and it was funny when I met with Phil and Rich in our 3-hour meeting, they told me that they had plans on doing 45 to 60 gigs a year. So I'm like, oh, wow, that's, was a lot more than what Shooting Star was doing. But, pretty good workload when you add in all the traveling that's involved with that. So I knew that having a day gig just wasn't possible. It was pretty much, you pretty much turn off everything else in your life. But it's so funny to have them say, we'll do 45 to 60 gigs a year. And my first full year, 2015, we did 98 gigs.
Wow.
Right. And then at the conclusion of that year, in January of 2016, and a couple weeks into February, we recorded Prelude Implicit. So I lived in Atlanta, with the exception of maybe 4 days. I was living in a hotel in Atlanta because we were recording that album and just working on that album every day. So that's 6 weeks that we took off to record that album. Went right back on the road in 2016 and did 99 shows.
Wow.
So it really was pretty life-changing. It was strange to come home on Monday, do laundry, and go back to the airport. It was pretty much the recipe for the time. So
yeah. How'd the voice hold up? Doing that much that quick all of a sudden? How'd the voice hold up at first?
Well, it's something. I've always said I know I'm not the greatest singer in the world, not even close. But if it's one thing I've always put a lot of pride in, is I've been blessed with endurance. And just like right before I joined Kansas, my local band Ara, when we do these summer festivals, the festival committee, they wanted you to play 3 hours and not take a
Wow.
break,
Oh wow.
and here we are doing 4, 5, 6 gigs a week, and I'm working a day gig.
Yeah.
It was, how the heck did I do that? Jesus, good God. No wonder I feel 112, but, it really, you know what? It's lifelong conditioning, I guess. So it's just something that I've unexpectedly prepared for my entire life. And it's something, as I said too, is I've always lived a double life. I've lived from the age of 14, probably, I've always been in at least one working band, at least. And then working, 45, 50, 55 hours a week in a day gig, that's a big
That's a
bite to
grind.
chew. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's a grind, but
Yeah.
it's funny when you get acclimated to something, when you're used to doing that, and it just seems to be a normality.
That's awesome. So let's talk about Kansas. You guys have a lot going on.
Oh man.
2020 record, 2021 live record. Talk about the record you released in 2020 first. I have the name on the tip of my tongue, but I know it's such a unique name. I'm having trouble pulling it up, getting the computer working.
Absence of presence. I thought I had an album. See, I'm constantly moving stuff in here. Absence of presence. And that is not a reference to Billy Greer's Christmas Day. It's funny that we came up with that title, or Phil actually came up with that title pre-pandemic, and it's actually kind of eerie.
Yeah.
To have that title long before the pandemic, and then the pandemic hits, and it's like there's an absence of presence everywhere. There was that one point where everyone was just, trying to stay at home, and restaurants were closed, and you go out, even where I live, just, a suburb west of Chicago. It really was eerie how there was no presence out on the street. There was no traffic, and just so many places were closed. It was really strange. So just really eerie a connection between the title of the album and what was going on at the time. And I know Phil told me that some of our musical counterpoints, our friends in the music business, they were like, why are you releasing an album in the middle of the pandemic? You can't go out and support it. It seems to be kind of futile to do that. And, we felt like, our Kansas fans are Kansas fans, regardless of the environment. And it was nice to give people something when everything was down. It was nice to come out with something to give the people at that point. So it actually worked out.
Yeah, in 2020, that was when this show really started building up our bookings with our guests, because we would sit down and we all of a sudden started getting so many pitches to have people we loved, people we knew. We would reach out, A, because artists were bored sitting at home, but also
Right.
B, they had decided to release what they had been working on just to give people a little bit of something to look forward to, give them a reprieve. And so I absolutely understand that mentality.
Little reminder of, hey, we're still out here, we're still here, and really a crazy time, because we didn't even see each other for 13 months. And, trying to get together, via Zoom to rehearse or work on music live just doesn't work,
Yeah,
especially with Kansas music. There's too much information trying to,
mhm.
when you've got Tom in New Jersey, I'm in Chicago, Billy's in Savannah, Phil and Rags are in Atlanta, Rich is up in the mountains of Carolina somewhere, it just
Yeah, too much
hunting something.
latency.
Give me my gun, honey.
So then you don't have to answer this, but when you tour, this has been a topic of us watching the stadium tour and all the big bus farm with Motley's buses and Leopard's buses and Poison's buses. So since you guys are all over the place, do you each pick up a bus in your respective state? Do you fly to the gigs? How does that work for you guys being all over the place?
Well, let me tell you about my bus experience.
Yes.
It was so funny, joining Shooting Star, and it's like being on that tour bus is kind of like that transition into rock and roll world, right?
Mhm.
And it's like, oh man, it's so cool the first time, going out and doing, a few shows, and you're getting on the bus, and it's like so cool. Let me tell you, that wears off really fast. when you're busing with not only your band, but also your crew and your driver and management is all in the same bus. You wait until the absolute last second to get on that bus when it's time to leave. But it's something that I've never done in Kansas. What we do is we will fly to our destination the day before the gig, check into the hotel. We will do that next night's gig, get up in the morning and drive. We work the routing out where, our next gig is always drivable. And we'll do, the series of gigs, whether it be 2 or 3 or 4 or out for a couple weeks, where we'll drive. And, just like if there's a considerable distance between 2 gigs, and, we might play on a Thursday, but have a Friday off, and that would be a travel day, which allows us time to, put a few 100 miles in before we do the next gig. And then when we're done with that series of gigs, fly home.
Very cool. Very cool.
It's nice. It's nice because I've heard some bus stories that I'm glad I wasn't a part of.
That's great. Go ahead, buddy.
Well, I was just gonna say, when you get as big as like Motley and dysfunctional like that, you kind of have to have your separate bus. But when you all love each other
Right.
all around, it's great, to have that time. But like you said, too many people on there kind of makes you, hey, you guys get on, I'll get on in 5 minutes.
Leave me
Yeah.
alone.
That's funny. Last night I was watching some stuff, and the Doobie Brothers came on, and we did a show with the Doobies, and it's like, super nice guys, but they all had their own bus. And that is a completely different world than having to share the bus with your bandmates and crew,
Sure.
so I could see that being pretty nice.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of the gigs, Point of No Return live, the newly subtitled, is it all new recordings, or is it the re-release of what came out in 2017?
No, it's all new.
Awesome.
All new, stuff that I forget how many shows, probably 8, 10, 12 different shows where Chad Singer, our front of house, our master of ceremonies, the man behind the curtain, pay no attention to Chad behind the curtain, who does an absolutely phenomenal job. He would just hit record at the beginning of our shows. And, after we recorded a few shows, and we would just, pick the songs, from particular nights that we really like. So everything is new. And, of course we've got, a few of the new songs on there too, not only from absence, but also from Prelude.
It's awesome.
When you said that he would hit record, did you guys know in advance that he was going to be recording, or do you guys like discuss that, or is it suddenly, or just you record everything so you kind of already anticipate?
Yeah, we knew we were recording, but
Mhm.
it's it's not something that's when you're in front of an audience, your audience is your main objective. So it was
Right.
never like, thinking, oh, we're recording this, I got to play it safe, or you know, me, I'm shoot from the hip, if I'm
Yeah,
feeling good, I'm running with it,
right.
So did we know that we were recording? Yes, but does it have much of a bearing on how we're performing? No.
Yeah. That's awesome. This is so cool. And when are you back? I wanted to check another thing I wanted to do. Buddy, you sit there at the computer. You have, I assume you're touring this summer or this fall.
Yeah,
Yep.
we have been on the road, and we're about to uh gosh, it's coming Monday. We're about to hit the road, and we're doing a whole full West Coast run. We'll be gone for 3 weeks
Oh,
and hitting
wow.
it hard.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
awesome.
And you guys have really expanded your fan base by, in a recent episode of Walker, which is on the
Yeah.
CW, a new documentary out. I mean, you guys are really getting out there, and that's fabulous, because rock is not dead, and rock needs, like, I took my daughter a couple of the K-pop, Korean pop concerts, and
K-pop comes up in the Kansas interview.
well, I'm getting somewhere with that. I'm getting somewhere. It's a lot of lip syncing,
Right.
and I don't believe that should ever be done in a live show personally. And I love that you guys keep it live and keep it real.
I don't mind when bands are using backing tracks to maybe embellish a little bit, but when it takes over the entire musical experience, when dare I say, Britney Spears, doing the entire show being pre-recorded and lip synced, and you're really just going to see the dancing live.
Right.
That is not any part of a Kansas show. What we're doing, the only thing that we use pre-recorded is that very staticky, albums, 1960s drop the needle on the record, beginning of Throwing Mountains,
Mhm.
before it goes into full band. That's the only thing that's pre-recorded with us. That's just the intro, the short intro, and everything we do is live. And I remember seeing an interview with Joe Walsh of the Eagles, and he's talking about there's something about the live element, and of course there's going to be good shows, and you feel they're all good shows, but when you are performing live and everybody's just hitting on all cylinders, it's really a magical thing that you're not going to get when you're playing along with pre-recorded music. It's that live element, and it's kind of a shame too. It's funny when I think about, I went to so many concerts back in the early 80s, and even in the late 70s. My very first concert was Electric Light Orchestra.
Oh, wow.
And there was no such thing as a cell phone back then. You couldn't bring a video. Was there even a video camera in 1978? If there was, it was the size of a suitcase,
Yeah.
but it's so funny, it made such an impression on me that it's forever burned into my memory. Just how intense it was, and just how exciting it was. And it's not that it bothers me, but I think guys, it's really something. I mean,
Yeah.
some of the venues, when we start Dust in the Wind, it's crazy to see 4,000 people hold up their phone, you know, and I'm seeing the camera end of the phone, and Chad, who's running our house, and Scott Pearson, who is our LD, our lighting director. They say, Ronnie, you got to see it from our perspective, because where they're sitting in back of the crowd, they see all these lighted screens, and it's just a sea of lighted screens. And, I understand you want to capture the moment and stuff, but boy, to just absorb it without looking at a phone,
Oh yeah.
it's really something. So it's something I'm thinking, I think is missing in the way people observe a show.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But
I usually try to, if I want to capture something, I try to look at it live, get my camera kind of angle, look at it live, and not look through the phone, because I can do that later.
yeah,
but
nothing.
but you don't realize your arm is getting tired, and suddenly you're videotaping the back of the person's head in the row in front of you.
Yeah, I'll do that. Especially if I'm close, I'll take a couple of pictures when they're near me, and then the rest of the time I try to be hands off. I'm absolutely with you. This has been so much fun, Ronnie. Anything else we need to cover here real quick before we let you go? I think we hit on absence of presence. We hit on point of no return. Oh, I know what I wanted to ask you, if you can say this at all.
Only the second Tuesday of every odd numbered month in a leap year. Does that answer your question?
We are on Tuesday.
Maybe
maybe
this outs me as not a true Kansas fan, because I haven't overanalyzed it. I love Kansas's music, but I've never put so much thought into why point of no return is spelled like KNOW. Is there an answer to that, or is that up to audience interpretation?
I think that's just something that bands like to do back in the day, or even today, how, they kind of mix up words a little bit to make it interesting. And God, was it Phil and Jeff Glicksman that came up with that or something? It was just a play on words, to make it interesting, add a little different element.
I love it. Well, before we let you go, I said I was going to ask this, and the fact that you're sitting there with a professional mic and you got your keyboard behind you, you don't want to do this. You don't want to put you on the spot. We'll edit this out. But can we get just a little bit of the chorus of Wayward Son?
Oh, you're kidding. You're going to put me on the spot like that? A little bit of the chorus of Wayward Son. You know what? Guys, when I sing, I don't sing softly.
Okay.
Wow, that's great.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Carry on my wayward son. That is, did your meters just like go off the charts there? I mean,
we love it.
Did I break your preamps?
No, I think we're good with that.
We're good. That was awesome. Ronnie Platt, an honor. This was so much fun. Thank you so much.
Same here, guys. This is a gas. It really is always so much fun to talk about my favorite subject, Kansas. And guys, to your audience and everyone, please visit kansasband.com, go under news, check out where the band is going and and all the shows we have booked. Unbelievable. This is Kansas's 50th year of a band.
Wow.
50. Wrap your mind around it, guys. 50 years, and there is no talk of stopping.
That's amazing.
That's awesome.
That's awesome.
So, guys,
right.
Thank you so much. It's been a gas. I can't believe I just did that. I screamed for you guys.
We love it. Oh, that was great. To know that Phil's 72 and he beats the drums like he's a teenager again. It's just really, really cool and definitely inspirational. Because
And I find that with drummers, because like when I'm watching you drum, and you're quite a fantastic drummer, and you have such scrawny little noodle arms, and then
not anymore.
well, you did, and then to watch you just start wailing away, I'm like, where did that come from? It's just drummers amaze me. They really do. And it was so much fun. And of course, you had to bring up K-pop. I'm like, where is this going?
Well, you bring up what seems like irrelevant things in interviews all the time, and then it gets.
Yes.
No, say it.
I know I do.
No, say it.
I'm aware.
Thank you.
This year, the blooper reel is just going to be highlights of me going, I'm aware, in our intros and outros here.
That's because he says it so much, and I had to have.
And I picked it up from my best friend. I don't want to talk about it. Anyway, well, when you got on to talking about little accents, and we were talking about accenting music with tracking, the cool thing was I saw Men at Work quite a while ago at the time that you were seeing this, but as we're recording this, the show's still fresh in my head. And the way they divvy up duties was really cool, because their keyboardist, who was also their saxophone player, would play the synth, because Men at Work has a lot of synth chords, a lot of synth melodies, and that keyboard was a catch-all. Not a one thing was a track. It was all played live on the synth through whatever sound they needed to achieve. And I think Kansas does the same. Saw Gaga about a month ago. She did the same. It's all, in fact, Gaga, the guy has a circular keyboard that you say you've actually seen those before, but he's inside of a circular keyboard.
Yeah, pretty neat. A lot of it's theatrics too, but you don't want the theatrics, like Ronnie was saying, you don't want the theatrics to top the music, because you're there for the music.
And he's talking about in-ears. The one thing I wonder about in-ears, because he's talking about it really isolating you, and I've always wondered this, because I see a lot of people who have in-ears. They're out, at least one of them's out by the fifth song in. I have to know, does it really take you out of being with the crowd?
Yeah, I mean, you are isolated in there. It's like self-isolating headphones. Like you're just stuck in this almost soundproof wall, it seems like. And I guess everyone's is different, of course. So if you want to hear something, it has to be on the mic, or driven to that monitor. And that's why you hear a lot of times everybody has their own monitor mix. They give me a little more of this or a little more of that, whereas somebody else give me less of this, less of that, because it's self-controlled. And sometimes you can do it yourself. You might, especially the drummers, you may see a little sound mixer up there, and that might be them adjusting their own, or perhaps whatever assistance they're running with tracks or whatever. So yeah, it can totally be isolating. I know musicians who have told me they don't like them because it takes them away from the crowd. But then you have wedges, like he said, on the ground, that you step a little too far to left or right, you don't quite get it. Plus you can get feedback more with those.
It's interesting, because as we've seen with Huey Lewis and a few others, if you're not careful, your hearing can all of a sudden just go downhill very, very quickly. And I think in-ears are an important revelation for that. I remember, gosh, you had to bring K-pop into this. I have to bring Garth into this episode. I remember Garth saying the very first time he ever used in-ears was the Las Vegas comeback tour, the Las Vegas arena shows at T-Mobile. Was the very first time he wore in-ears, because at that show, for the run of four or five shows that he did there, he wore the same shirt, stood in the same spots, and had to wear in-ears because they were recording. I don't know if they I don't know if they'll ever end up releasing those shows, but he wore them for the recording, and now he's wore them since, but I think he just wears one, and then that ends up out
Yeah. Well, that's interesting because I don't remember hearing about that. And so many artists use the in-ears now. And
Yeah.
a lot of times, yes, they may have two, but usually one is out and you can tell they're taking in the crowd. And sometimes that's just an easy way to talk to people too. So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting concept, how you go from stage wedges or monitors are called to in-ears.
Yeah. Well, to be continued, these wonderful conversations. For the Music Universe podcast, I'm Matt.
And buddy, thanks for listening and watching. Be sure to hit that like, subscribe, and share button and follow us on social media at The Music Uni. And be sure to check out themusicuniverse.com for the latest news and concert reviews. Take care.